Hello, thank you for tuning in to the Community Collecting and Storytelling series. The module that I'll be presenting now has two parts. I'm going to introduce the When Are We Us theme for the America 250 commemoration and talk about some panel design tips, because designing display panels is one way that you can present some local content for the commemoration participation. Before I begin with the content tonight, I want to tell you a little bit about my background. My name is Adrienne Berney. I'm the outreach coordinator for the State Archives of North Carolina. And I have come to exhibits from a lot of experience over the years with permanent, temporary, and traveling exhibits. And I've enjoyed developing all of those. I'm a trained academic historian, and I also have experience as a museum curator. So hopefully I've picked up some tips along the way that you can learn from and can give you some guidance and maybe even some inspiration. So the America 250 commemoration is coming up, and North Carolina is planning two major themes. The first one is Revolutionary North Carolina. North Carolina was one of the original 13 states. And our commemoration is going to start a little before most other states. Most states are starting in 2026, but North Carolina wants to begin with commemorating the Edenton Tea Party, which happened in 1774. So our commemoration is going to start sooner in 2024, and it's the semi-sesquicentennial. So that's coming up. Most of the primary sources that relate to Revolutionary North Carolina are found in the state archives or also at UNC Chapel Hill's Carolina Room. But the When Are We Us theme is much more expansive across time and space and relates to topics like common identity and civil rights. And so all communities throughout the state have the potential to contribute to that with primary sources and with programming and exhibits. So we hope that this commemoration will inspire communities to do just that and collect. There's still time to collect if you don't have any primary sources yet, but you want to participate with your own local materials. It's my hope that this commemoration will be more inclusive and varied a presentation of American history, and a way for all communities, as I mentioned, to be involved. And that the materials we provide in exhibits and programs can provide messages of hope. The idea that we're all in this together, that there's no us and them, it's all us. And that there can be progress in this country to work more towards the ideals of our founding and those shared principles. We're working in our department among our staff to provide a partner toolkit, which will be an online gathering place for a variety of resources, including a graphic and logo package, so that local communities can brand themselves with the North Carolina A250 logos, kids' activity templates, children's book lists for story times and story walks, an online directory for video resources, a speakers bureau, genealogy and research trainings, digitized primary source directories, and that will be a gathering place for all kinds of links out to a variety of repositories across the state that have digitized materials related to both themes and beyond, not just in North Carolina, but also beyond. And then we'll have some print-on-demand exhibit panels with the When Are We Us theme that in your own community, you can print according to the size that works best for your own space. And that can be the core exhibit. And then you can use these materials that you'll be gathering through your own community collecting and really build out some additional panels to make it as relevant as it can be for your community. Okay, now I'm going to show you some different types of display panels, hopefully give you some ideas. They don't have to be high tech and they don't have to be expensive. And one example is something that the Mordecai Historic Park in Raleigh used recently. This is a story walk, but it could also be interpretive panels the same way. These are those yard type signs you see everywhere, especially during campaign seasons. And they're just polypropylene squares on a metal stand. You can work with a sign company to produce these with your own content. And that's a fairly inexpensive and simple way to produce graphic panels. Okay, here's another type, and this is something that our department uses for traveling exhibit panels, the story of barbecue example here on the right. And it's more of a window shade type of format on a stand. They're very easy to travel. These are a little more expensive. But DNCR is going to be providing several of these window shade format traveling exhibits. They're planning 2 themes for those, a Revolutionary War timeline, Revolutionary War in North Carolina, and a People of the Revolution exhibit. So if you have a really big space, you could potentially borrow both of those and combine them for an extra large set of panels. Probably each of those will have 7 to 10 panels. And then, as I mentioned, those When Are We Us print on demand panels will also be coming as an additional option for you. And again, you should be able to customize the size and add to it to really customize the material you're presenting for your community. But we need your help. And there's still time for you to collect from your communities and identify those stories that you want to be included so that we can really talk about your region and share that across the state. Okay, here's another example of a graphic panel with text. This again is outside. So imagine that you're walking on a hike and you see this out of the corner of your eye. What about this panel would make you stop and come closer and take a closer look? So the first thing I notice is that large title, Historic Cary. And this is one of the examples from the town of Cary. If you like history and you want to learn more about Cary, that might entice you to get a little closer. Then the subtitle is African American Community, Education, and Faith. If you're interested in that, that'll draw you in just a little further, and you'll be able to see that the illustrations include buildings, a man, and a map. So maybe that intrigues you more, and then you'll be ready to dive in and read some of the text. And this text is quite extensive. We'll be talking about the amount of text that we use in creating panels. But again, you really have to capture someone's attention to get a passerby engaged enough to read this amount of text. Okay, for each of these projects, whether it's a display or a program, you should have a big idea in mind. What do you want your audience to come away with from that exhibit, from that program? And for this module today, the big idea I hope to convey, and that I might hammer over and over again so that it sinks in, is that your big idea should be shared just by a visual and a title. And this slide is kind of an example of that. You should not rely on paragraphs of text to convey your big idea. A display, a set of panels is not a book. And if you have a volume of things that you need to share, consider a book or a blog series. Do not use a display for that purpose, because the text is not something that's going to draw in people who are in motion, or many of them, to the degree to really absorb all the information you want to give. Make sure your big idea is comprehensible at a glance with visuals and titles and subtitles. Okay, here's an example, and this is not an exhibit panel. There's way too much going on, but I thought this was a good example for us to take a look at because the fine print here is really illegible. And so the big idea I think you can get at a glance from looking at the title and looking at the graphics. And then on the left, there's a set of subtitles or subheadings. So all of those elements can give the important message. And the big idea with the title, American Revolution, and then the graphics. So let's take a look at those. It's faint, but I hope you're seeing the outline of the state of North Carolina. You're also seeing a variety of shapes, ovals and circles going in different directions. And within some of those, you see dotted lines. So that conveys a lot of activity and a lot of movement. And with the American Revolution in North Carolina, that itself is the big idea. Think about more standard versions of the American Revolution story, and a lot of those are centered on New England. Paul Revere's Ride, for instance, and the Mid-Atlantic. Washington and Valley Forge crossing the Delaware. And then the South kind of comes into play at the very end of the war in 1781 with the Battle of Yorktown and a victory for the Patriots. But that's not the full story. There was a lot going on in the South, a lot going on in North Carolina. And so this image with the title in itself conveys that. And then the sidebar with the different colors and subtitles gives you a sense of some of those compelling stories, various battles and movements. But then you also have some unique stories to North Carolina with the Cherokee resistance in the western part of the state and the Tory War. Tory is another word for loyalist, and that's a big story for North Carolina. There were a lot of loyalists, a lot of infighting within communities, and that's a story that our commemorative materials will be telling. It's not always a great story or a celebratory story, but it's one that we should share because it speaks to the differences in dissent within communities and ways that things can fracture. Okay, in addition to a big idea, which often is conveying something you want your audience to learn, and that engages their head, think about these other components. Think about this trilogy: head, heart, hands. The heart relates more to feelings. What do you want your audience to feel? How should they feel coming away from the exhibit? Different audience sectors may feel things in different ways. Consider that. That's okay. Consider that. And then hands. What might your exhibit or program motivate your audience to do? I'm hoping with the big idea here that this module will also motivate you to create your own displays and to recognize the semi-quincentennial, the upcoming commemoration. Studies in art museums can help us think about panel design because studies have concluded that the average time a visitor spends viewing a painting, whether it's a grand master or sculpture or what, is 30 seconds. Now, we may not even get 30 seconds worth of attention for a panel. You have to be able to draw the viewer in before you can even get that 30 seconds. So again, think about compelling images, compelling words to draw in and help them learn more. In museum studies courses, we talk about 3 audience types for exhibits: streakers, strollers, and students. And I guess we have all been all 3 of these at one time, perhaps even in the same exhibit. Most of your audience will streak by. If you don't capture their attention, that's all they're going to do. So again, the big idea has to be conveyed very quickly with visuals. Some of your audience is going to slow down and stroll, and a very small percentage will be studious about whatever topic you will try to present and read what you've written. But keep your writing brief. Titles should have 7 words or less, and active verbs, powerful adjectives. Text panels, no more than 3 to 5 sentences. We really stick with a limit of 75 words when we're producing traveling exhibits in this department. You can add a little more information with sidebars and quotations, but again, they should be brief, 2 sentences or less. And then your labels can be a fine print area where you give the identifying information you need, the reference that if someone's trying to use that image or object that you photographed on your panel, they know what repository it comes from and how to access it. So here's another example of an exhibit. This is a permanent exhibit that won awards at the American Civil War Museum in Richmond. And I think it conveys a lot just from the images. We can't even read the words here, although you see there are some small panels of words. So what do you see? What message are you getting right from a quick glance? Well, you see soldiers, one that's pretty old, maybe my age or a little older, one who's very young, certainly a teenager. So you get that age range of the enormity of the draft in the Civil War. And then you also see all kinds of weapons, a dagger and different types of rifles and bayonets. So you're getting that idea about harm, and these men and boys are vulnerable, but also perhaps inflicting harm. And then you see a quote with the yellow panel that's too small for us to read, but maybe it has to do with daily life, because you see a selection of smaller objects, dishes and eating implements, pouches that might contain writing or leisure time activities. So a little bit about daily life there. And then there's a black panel over to the left that is more of a text panel. Again, we can't read that now, but just see how brief that is. And that's something that you want to work toward, is keeping it brief. One of the main two keys I want to drill into you with this module is the brevity. And if you think that 75 words is not achievable for all the information you want to convey and all the important stories that you have to tell and share, think about the example of our state historical highway marker program. When someone, whether it's a group or an individual researcher, submits an application to get a new marker, they're submitting a huge pile of research and references. Our staff, my colleagues, have to distill that down to 25 words if the application is accepted. So if they can do complex subjects and distill it into a 25-word descriptor, and again, these are all designed for streakers because people driving by need to be able to at least read the title, if not a few of the sentences, or a few of the words. There might not be a full sentence. If they can do that in 25 words, then 75 words should be achievable for us with exhibit panels. Distill, distill, distill. Hopefully this image helps that sink in. A big set of stills for making moonshine in the 1940s. We need to be expert distillers, just like these moonshiners, when we're writing exhibit text. So keep that in mind. That's what you want to do, is distill. From something big comes something much smaller, but more potent. The other key to writing text is to choose compelling words. And this example is one I came across years ago. It has stuck with me, so I want to share it with you. Hopefully it will stick with you and help you remember what makes good title writing. Which grabs more attention? The reproductive cycle of aquatic vertebrates, or do fish have sex? Well, you know my answer from the way I've organized this. The second title, I believe, is much more compelling, not only for the word's content, but also just the question. Questions can be effective titles, just like When Are We Us? Because it invites your audience to explore and discover. It's not just conveying a set of facts. So don't shy away from questions. That can be very useful. It can't be all titles, but it can be something that works well. Powerful quotes is something else to keep in mind, and think back to the Head, Heart, and Hands trilogy, and the quotes are someone's voice, and that can be something that makes your viewer feel connected to a different person, a different time and place. I like this one from Floyd McKissick, who was a Durham attorney and civil rights leader. My ancestry is Africa, but I'm an American, and I don't want to be anything else but that. I think that's powerful. To me, it conveys pride and a sense of common identity. And those are some of the themes that I hope the When Are We Us commemoration can get at and explore and promote. Okay, here's some other text pointers besides what we've gone over, including some of what we've already covered. Keep your text to an 8th grade level. So no complex sentence constructions. That's going to derail the quality of your exhibit and the way that your audience can engage with it. Don't think you can do this by yourself. Even if you're well-versed in writing, even if you're well-versed in exhibit writing, let several sets of eyes review it. They will catch errors that you didn't see and help you eliminate non-essential words and phrases. Again, help you distill. Use active voice verbs, and we'll get to explain that a little more on the next slide. Have your language be as colorful as possible. Questions, as I mentioned, can be effective titles. And then font size is important, and types of font. We'll address that a little more in just a moment. For quotes, identify the speaker and the time period, possibly the location, and a little bit about why that speaker was important. And then maintain high contrast between the background of the panel and the type, the font. We'll see some examples. Okay, what is an active voice verb construction versus passive voice? So I'm using Floyd McKissick as an example. An active voice verb is Floyd McKissick founded Soul City. Still active, but a little weaker, is Floyd McKissick was the founder of Soul City. And notice that adds a couple words to your word count, which you don't want. And then finally, the passive version, Soul City was founded by Floyd McKissick. So that's emphasizing the object, it's emphasizing Soul City and kind of de-emphasizing the actor in the sentence. Sometimes that is going to be your best option, but for the most part, you want to avoid that and really try to have your sentences active voice, verb construction. It's more direct, it's more comprehensible for most people, and a little bit briefer, which we're always trying to keep that word count down. Okay, accessibility, size matters, and the height that you place your text also matters. Remember, not everyone coming past your text panels, graphic panels, is going to be tall. So the summary is that 5 feet is sort of the target for the largest number of people in your audience. And that's a span of text. So some of your text will be a little above that, some below. The further you go in either direction means that your lettering has to increase in size. Titles should be at least 3 inches. The closest range of text type needs to be a little more than 1/4 inch. Also, types of font matter. And one thing I recommend is to check out the Smithsonian's guidelines for accessible exhibit design. I've got the URL here for your reference. But they have a variety of types of recommendations for different fonts. Some are more legible than others, and you can really work through some of those guidelines to make your selections and figure out what size is going to be best for your space. And here's some examples of contrast. The top 2 work, the bottom 2 do not work. Something very dark on a light or bright background is a good idea, or in the reverse, a dark background with white or a very light colored type. If there's not enough contrast, it doesn't work, low visibility. And with the trend of the color gray in the last maybe 10 years, I've seen quite a number of exhibit panels with light gray on a dark gray background or vice versa. And that's just not enough contrast for most people. Some colors really don't work well together, like this green on red. And not only does that sort of vibrate, but people that have a kind of color blindness may not see that at all. Black on red is another set of colors that don't work together for that population. So those are my main design tips for panels, but I also want you to keep in mind that more people are going to come to your exhibit if you plan a program. So your exhibit can be in the background, but the programs are what are going to drive people to your space. And parades are a wonderful example of grassroots creativity and pageantry. This is a view of Asheville's Mardi Gras parade. I can see When Are We Us being a great parade theme with a number of different elements like floats, showcasing various portions of subtopics that might fit into that theme. 4th of July parade would be a great opportunity to celebrate some of the themes we're talking about in this commemoration. But I want to remind you that a commemoration isn't only about celebration, and it leaves space for more somber rituals and acknowledgement of past suffering. Certainly with the American Revolution, not only were there battles, but also internal fighting between the Loyalists and Patriots, the Cherokee and the white settlers, for two of many instances. When Are We Us talks about civil rights and some tough history. Hopefully, your institution can embrace its possible role as being a third place, a neutral ground, bringing people with opposite perspectives or different perspectives together to discuss rationally and calmly and respectfully, and build bridges and create shared identities and middle ground where maybe it was shaky before. Programming with When Are We Us, I think, has that potential, and I hope that that will work out for you and your community. Okay, hopefully I've motivated you to get involved in the commemoration and given you some tips on ways to produce a display that might relate to it. But we also have many other modules for you to think about community collecting and storytelling. There's one on free and open source digital exhibits, another on community scanning days, and a final one on oral history projects. View those in any order. I hope you'll stay in touch. As I mentioned, we are building out a website, and if you stay in touch, we can alert you when that's going to be ready. Here's my contact information. I'd love to hear from you, and I wish you all the best with your commemorative activities and bringing your community together through history. Thanks for tuning in.